Our records show he was in our employment for 4 months, but he probably only worked about 20 days for us. And as far as filleting fish, he never got proficient at it. So we bring kids in and train them, and until they're good enough, we don't allow them to do customers' fish. So he probably only practiced filleting maybe 8 to 10 days out of those 20 days. Another part of their job is to be friendly to customers, to help people fish, to pick up paper and stay busy. This probably was his first job because he was only, I think, 16 at the time. So after he was here several times, it became obvious to me.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Now, what is very useful with Koberger's ex-boss, that's Charles Conklin, going on to News Nation, is that he provides slightly more detail than we got from the Idaho Statesman on February 22nd. For example, we learned that his duties, Koberger's duties at the Big Brown Fish and Pay Lakes, that's in Effort, Pennsylvania, which is right next to that pizza place that he worked as well. His duties included fishing. And he was also his duties were meant to include helping customers catch fish as well. He needed to sort of show them the ropes, but then he sort of lacked the social graces to get to that level. Now, you may remember on December 22nd, when I provided a profile of the Idaho killer, I suggested he had some kind of hunting experience. I said that he'd worked in a butchery or otherwise gutted fish, but he had worked with a knife. And personally, how I understand it, despite what the manager says, this wasn't actually Koberger's first job. As far as I am aware, his first was in a pizza kitchen. But what I think is useful is to visualize precisely what fish filleting involves. And so we're going to go through some actual photos from the Big Brown Hatchery where Brian worked. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started.
This probably was his first job because he was only, I think, 16 at the time. So after he was here several times, it became obvious to me.
And then he goes on to talk about how poor Brian's social skills were and that he, worked about 4 months and so on. Now, what I want you to imagine in your mind is this hunting ground, right? It's in Brian's past, but that is what it is. It's a hunting ground for fish. And I want you to compare that. Bear in mind, this is a summer photo, and I'm going to be juxtaposing that in the video with a winter photo. Whereas when Brian was looking at the funhouse, it was actually, I think August or September. So also in summer, at the time that he first saw it. But in the same way that the water itself under the trees is a kind of window into the world within. Sometimes the fish jump out of it and you see them. And in the same way, the residents appeared in a flash in front of the windows or on their balconies. It would provide a similar glimpse. Fishing with a hook and bait is an analogy, in my opinion, for going on to Maddie's social media and repeatedly trying to engage with her. I also personally believe that Koberger did encounter Maddie at the Mad Greek restaurant, which is another analogy for being, it's kind of an allegory for being initially drawn to somewhere in the pond by food. You're drawn somewhere perhaps a little bit outside of your usual pattern of movement. You're drawn there by food. That is what fishing involves as well. A hook lands in the water and the fish departs off its typical route, right? Why? Because of the lure of food. And so maybe his vegan diet acted as a kind of specific bait in terms of getting him into the situation he ended up getting into. But now I want you to consider really what we want to talk about here. The process of catching the fish in 2011 at this Brown's Big Brown Fish and Pay Lakes venue, right? And all of this, what you're about to see, comes from their Facebook page. So it's authentic. It's very clear what is going on. And so the process would be to catch a fish transferred into a holding container where the fish cleaner knows exactly how many fish are sort of floating around, and he knows also precisely what fate lies in store of them. He's looking at those fish knowing what is about to happen to them. And so what this is amounts to really the serial killing of fish, the butchering of fish. Now, the impression I get from these images is that the fish is cleaned out while still alive and flapping. The coup de grace only seems to occur at the end of the filleting process. From the image that you're seeing now, you can see the system that is used, the protocol, I guess, is to remove the head last, which means the poor fish as well as the fish cleaner experience the full agony of the process. They're not spared it. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Brian became a vegan as a result of this experience. Bear in mind, as far as I know, he was working interchangeably at the pizza place where there's food, human food, and then right next door, the fish thing going on. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was really put off by that whole thing. You kind of get the idea he was quite a sensitive person in a certain way. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this is where his own diet started. And if it is, you can imagine it was something that was so traumatic that it led to a permanent change in his eating habits. And that's quite a serious imprinting at a young age. And that is what the point I'm trying to make is that don't you think that something imprinted right here? In the same way with Jeffrey Dahmer, there's an imprinting in terms of what he was doing with animals, with his father. Now, bear in mind, although he never apparently graduated to actually filleting fish for customers, if he spent 8 days or 20 days on site in the summer, we know he was there a total of 4 months, but it amounted to less days actually on site. Well, in those 8 days or 20 days, he would have done dozens, if not hundreds of filleting jobs in person and then witnessed hundreds more. And so if the criminal psychology ever brewed in his mind that he was so angry he could kill, well, he had plenty of experience to draw on. Also, if he had ever acquired a knife, hadn't he acquired it during this summer job in 2011 when he was 16? And hadn't he kept it ever since? And didn't that knife remind him of that bloody summer where he could still smell the smell of fish on his hands and his clothes? And then years later, in a drug-exposed state, hadn't his thoughts drifted back to the past as he sat outside the funhouse silently watching, silently fishing? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.